August 12, 1949, 10:14 p.m., the 28th Precinct West 123rd Street. The double doors of the station house swung open with a heavy, rusted groan that cut through the humidity of the Harlem night. The bullpen was a cacophony of shouting drums, clacking typewriters, and ringing telephones, but the moment the figure in the doorway stepped into the light, the noise died. It didn't taper off. It was severed. Every head turned. Every breath held. Standing on the threshold was Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. He was alone. He was unarmed, and he was walking directly into the headquarters of the men who had sworn to put him in an electric chair by morning. Inside the bullpen, Sergeant Patrick the Butcher O'Malley and his elite night shift unit, 8 of the most corrupt and violent officers in New York City, froze. They had a shoot-on-sight order for Bumpy issued just 3 hours ago. On the desk in front of O'Malley sat a loaded Thompson submachine gun. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee, sweat, and impending violence. O'Malley's hand drifted toward the Thompson. He grinned, a predator seeing a deer walk into a slaughterhouse. "You must have a death wish, Johnson," O'Malley sneered, the silence amplifying his gravelly voice. "Or maybe you just wanted to save us the cab fare to pick up your corpse." Bumpy didn't flinch. He walked calmly to the center of the room, pulled out a wooden chair, and sat down. He checked his Patek Philippe watch. 10:15 p.m. "I'm not here to surrender, Sergeant," Bumpy said, his voice low and steady. "I'm here because, in exactly 14 minutes, this building is going to stop being a police station and start being a mausoleum, and I'm the only one who has the key to the exit." 3 weeks earlier, the delicate ecosystem of Harlem had been thrown into chaos. Bumpy Johnson was more than a crime boss. He was the stabilizer of the Harlem underworld. By 1949, his organization ran like a Fortune 500 company. He controlled the policy banks, mediated disputes, and maintained a profitable, if tense, peace with the Italian 5 families downtown. His power came from a simple philosophy: violence is bad for business. He preferred to pay the police rather than fight them, turning the 28th Precinct into a silent partner rather than an adversary. However, the political winds were shifting. A new municipal election was looming, and City Hall needed headlines. They needed a tough-on-crime narrative to distract from the corruption scandals rocking the mayor's office. The mandate came down: destroy Bumpy Johnson. To execute this, the department empowered a rogue unit within the 28th Precinct, led by Sergeant O'Malley. These weren't beat cops, they were a hit squad with badges. They ignored the payoffs. They raided Bumpy's grandmother's home. They beat his runners in broad daylight on 125th Street. They weren't trying to arrest Bumpy. They were trying to provoke a war that would justify gunning him down in the street. The stakes were lethal. O'Malley had seized 3 of Bumpy's primary counting houses in a single week, confiscating over $60,000, nearly $750,000 today. But worse, O'Malley had begun intercepting shipments meant for the Genovese crime family, disrupting the supply chain between East Harlem and the rest of the city. Bumpy was being squeezed from both sides. The Italians blamed him for the lost shipments, and the police were hunting him. Bumpy knew he couldn't win a shootout with the NYPD. If he killed a cop, the National Guard would be in Harlem by sunrise. He had to find a way to neutralize the police without firing a single bullet. He had to turn their own corruption into a noose. Sergeant Patrick the Butcher O'Malley was a man who believed a badge was a license to hunt. Standing 6'3" with fists like sledgehammers, O'Malley was a relic of a bygone era of policing, where confessions were beaten out of suspects with telephone books. He was sadistic, greedy, and fiercely ambitious. He didn't want to stop the numbers racket. He wanted to own it. His plan was simple: kill Bumpy Johnson, fracture the organization, and install his own puppet lieutenants to run the game, kicking 80% of the profits back to his unit. O'Malley's ruthlessness was legendary. 2 years prior, he had thrown a suspect off the roof of a tenement on 135th Street and listed it as a failed escape attempt. He commanded a unit of 8 men who were equally compromised gamblers, drinkers, and sadists who owed O'Malley their careers. The threat to Bumpy was existential. O'Malley had sent word through the grapevine that Bumpy was to be killed on sight, with the throwaway gun planted on his body to justify the shooting. He had resources Bumpy didn't, the full legal authority of the state. But O'Malley made a critical error. He was greedy. When he seized the shipments intended for the Genovese family, he didn't log them into evidence. He kept them. He planned to sell the goods back to a rival faction in Brooklyn. He thought because he was the police, the Italians wouldn't touch him. He forgot that the mafia had rules that superseded the law, and he forgot that Bumpy Johnson knew everything that happened in Harlem, including where O'Malley hid his stolen loot. 10:16 p.m. The atmosphere inside the bullpen was suffocating. The ceiling fans lazily chopped the smoke-filled air, doing nothing to cool the tension. The 8 officers of the night shift slowly circled Bumpy's chair, hands resting on their holstered revolvers. The desk sergeant, a fat man named Kowalski, locked the front door and pulled the blinds. The station was now a sealed box. O'Malley stepped out from behind the high desk. He racked the slide on the Thompson. The metallic clack-clack echoed off the tile walls. "You walked in here alone," O'Malley growled, stepping close enough that Bumpy could smell the rye whiskey on his breath. "That means you're either stupid or you're done fighting. Which is it, boy?" 10:19 p.m. Bumpy didn't look at the gun. He looked O'Malley in the eye. He reached into his pocket. Instantly, 8 service revolvers were drawn. Hammers clicked back. "Easy," Bumpy said, his voice calm as a frozen lake. He pulled out a pack of cigarettes and a lighter. He lit one, took a long drag, and exhaled. "I'm here to offer you a trade, Patrick. Your life for my freedom." "My life," O'Malley laughed, a harsh barking sound. "I'm the one holding the machine gun. You're the one sitting in the chair." 10:21 p.m. "True," Bumpy nodded. "But you're holding a gun in a room. Outside this room there are 3 cars parked across the street. Black sedans, Packard Super 8s. O'Malley's smile faltered slightly. He flicked his eyes to the window. "In those cars," Bumpy continued, "are 12 men sent by Frank Costello. They aren't here for me. They're here for the man who stole a shipment of heroin from the docks on Tuesday, a shipment that was supposed to go to East Harlem." 10:23 p.m. The room went dead silent. The officers looked at each other. They knew about the theft. They had helped O'Malley unload the crates into the basement of the Precinct violation of every federal law in the book. "You're lying," O'Malley hissed, but sweat began to bead on his upper lip. "Am I?" Bumpy asked. "Check your safe, Patrick, the one in the basement. You think Costello doesn't have eyes on the docks? You think he doesn't know you took it? They tracked the truck here. They know the drugs are in the basement." 10:25 p.m. Bumpy leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "They are going to arrest you, Sergeant. They are going to storm this precinct. They are going to kill every man in this room, retrieve their property, and burn this building to the ground. And they'll blame it on a Harlem riot. Who's going to investigate? You'll all be dead." 10:26 p.m. One of the officers, a younger man named Miller, went to the window and peered through the blinds. He turned back, his face pale as a sheet. "Sarge," Miller choked out, There are 3 Packards across the street. Engines are running. I see shotguns." 10:28 p.m. The dynamic in the room shattered. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by primal fear. These cops were bullies, not soldiers. They were used to beating up drunks, not fighting a war against the Genovese crime family. O'Malley looked at the Thompson in his hands. It suddenly felt very heavy and very useless against a dozen mob enforcers. "What do you want?" O'Malley whispered. The gun lowered an inch. What O'Malley didn't know was that the hit squad outside wasn't there to kill him, at least, not yet. Bumpy had orchestrated the entire tableau. The cars outside were indeed full of armed men, but they were Bumpy's men, mixed with a few Italian associates he had borrowed as a favor from a capo in East Harlem. Bumpy had tipped off the Italians about the theft, yes, but he had convinced them to let him handle the recovery to avoid a messy war that would bring heat on everyone. Bumpy had walked into the station not as a hostage, but as a negotiator. He had the Italians on a leash, but O'Malley didn't know that. O'Malley thought the wolves were at the door, and the lock was broken. 10:29 p.m. Bumpy stood up. The cops flinched, but nobody raised a gun. "I want the shipment," Bumpy said. "You're going to bring it up from the basement. You're going to load it into the truck parked in the alley, and then you're going to resign." "Resign?" O'Malley sputtered. "If you stay," Bumpy said, examining his fingernails. "I can't guarantee Frank Costello won't come back tomorrow. The only reason those men haven't come through that door yet is because I told them I was inside negotiating the return of their property. If I don't walk out of here in," Bumpy checked his watch, 3 minutes, with the goods, they come in, and they won't be taking prisoners. 10:30 p.m. Bumpy reached into his pocket again. This time, he pulled out a heavy brass key. He tossed it onto O'Malley's desk. It clattered loudly against the wood. "That's the key to the truck in the alley. You boys better start lifting heavy boxes." The twist was psychological. Bumpy had turned the police station, their fortress, into a cage. He made them realize that without his protection, they were exposed to a force much greater than the NYPD. He stripped them of their badge's authority and reduced them to terrified men begging for a lifeline. O'Malley looked at his men. They were looking at him with pleading eyes. They didn't want to die for O'Malley's greed. "Do it," O'Malley croaked. "Get the stuff." The scene that followed was surreal. 8 NYPD officers, who 15 minutes earlier were planning a murder, began frantically hauling crates of stolen contraband up from the basement. They were sweating, panting, and terrified. They carried the boxes out the back door to the alley where Bumpy's truck waited. Bumpy stood in the center of the bullpen, smoking his cigarette, watching the night shift work for him. 10:42 p.m. The truck was loaded. O'Malley stood by the back door, his shirt soaked through, his hand shaking. "It's done," O'Malley said. "Now call them off." Bumpy walked to the back door. He looked at the truck, then at O'Malley. "One more thing," Bumpy said. "The shoot-on-sight order. It's rescinded, and my counting houses reopen tomorrow, tax-free." O'Malley nodded vigorously. "Yes, done. Just get them out of here." Bumpy walked out into the alley. He signaled to the driver of the truck. As the truck pulled away, Bumpy walked to the corner and signaled the 3 Packards across the street. They flashed their headlights once and drove away slowly. Inside the station, the officers collapsed into chairs, wiping their brows, believing they had just survived a massacre. They didn't realize they had just been played by the greatest chess master in Harlem. The aftermath was swift. O'Malley, broken by the humiliation and terrified of the Italian retribution he believed was still hanging over him, put in his papers the next morning. He claimed health reasons and moved to upstate New York within the week. The night shift was disbanded by a captain who sensed that O'Malley had brought too much heat to the precinct. The 28th Precinct returned to the status quo. The beat cops went back to taking their envelope and looking the other way. Bumpy Johnson had walked into the lion's den, declawed the lion, and walked out with a truckload of leverage. This incident is whispered about in Harlem history not as a shootout but as the night of the quiet storm. It mattered because it demonstrated the hierarchy of power in the mid-century underworld. Bumpy proved that a badge gives you authority, but leverage gives you power. It revealed Bumpy's unique insight: fear is a currency. O'Malley used fear to bully shopkeepers. Bumpy used fear to bully the bullies. He understood that the police were not a monolithic force of justice. They were just a gang with better uniforms, and like any gang, they feared a bigger predator. By positioning himself as the buffer between the police and the mob, Bumpy made himself indispensable. The universal lesson from that sweltering night in 1949 is this: when you are outgunned, you must change the battlefield. Bumpy couldn't win a physical fight, so he turned it into a psychological siege. He showed that the most dangerous weapon in a room isn't the machine gun on the desk. It's the mind of the man who knows what you're afraid of. If you enjoyed this breakdown of how Bumpy Johnson outsmarted the NYPD, smash that like button. It helps the channel grow. Subscribe for more deep dives into the true history of organized crime. And tell me in the comments, was O'Malley a fool, or was Bumpy just that good? Next week, the true story of the battle for the Sugar Hill Apartments.